Well, I started because I didn't want to waste any time. I mean, we started at 31 past 11, which is frankly is late as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's a pretty big
I mean,
failure.
it's still like 2 hours earlier than
I got stung by a bee. And it hurts. I got stung by a cave leech. Yeah. The thing is, it was like on my head. I felt something like on my head, and I just thought, "Oh, what's that?" And I sort of brushed it, and I tried to get it off, and then I felt something cut me basically, and it's like, huh? And then I started panicking, and slapping the top of my head, and yeah. I mean, I don't know what happened to it. I don't actually know if it was a bee or a wasp or a hornet or a stingtail.
Alien species where you're now doomed to suffer an alien illness.
An alien illness.
Yeah.
Like rock pox.
Yeah.
That's an alien illness.
Rock pox.
Rock blocks.
Welcome to
Life is Roblox. Incredibly long awaited.
Yeah.
Warnings. Oh, damn it. I thought we were going to be in sync. Warnings tier list. Long overdue. Maybe not long awaited. That might be a better way to put it. It definitely feels like a very classic one in the sense that it reminds me of when doing tier lists, for the first time, because we haven't done this one yet. So, unlike doing the weapons one, the recent weapons one, which I forgot how fucking long that took. Jesus Christ. This should not take this should be less than an hour ideally. For me, ideally it should be. Otherwise we're going for too long. Yeah, basically there's warnings and we haven't talked about them yet in this capacity. And we probably should. And warnings are pretty cool. Pretty cool. I would say, and you might actually disagree with me, but I actually think they're a very, very ample system. I think it's a system that I think it's just that it has sore spots in the variables it has, not the actual way it works.
Yeah, I think warnings is one of the main reasons why the games is good. Right?
Yeah,
it is such a face like there are a lot of things in the cave that are random or change the way you experience that cave, but the warnings are like an instant, this mission will be different from normal.
Exactly.
Warning,
there are warnings that need to change, but I think in general, I don't think it's a system that needs any changes. I think the modifier system itself, or the mutator system, because obviously we talked a lot about how some warnings perhaps beg for a new type of mutator. But that's different. That's not. I don't think that's warning's fault. In fact, I don't know why I'm saying all this like in defense of warnings, but in general, I think it's sort of.
It's nothing we won't say more relevant.
No.
To ones. Right?
No.
That's probably going to be the main talking piece because I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to talk about cave leech cluster.
Well, you'd be surprised. Well, first of all, we don't exactly know how we're going to be rating these. I mean, I do, and I guess you do as well. It's literally just how good they are, right? Which is kind of like my actual preferred way of doing things. Even though people, I would actually assume that most like enemy tier lists, for example, are probably something like how annoying are they or whatever. I would actually assume that to be the case. I mean, you could view warnings like missions, but obviously missions makes I don't see any other way to do missions other than how good they are. But obviously, warnings are something with a very express purpose of making the game harder, which is why rating them in terms of how difficult they are is a valid approach. But that's also going to be a heavy factor and also in just how good they are, or rather how well designed they are. Obviously, that's a bit of arrogance on our part in sort of assuming that we know what makes a good warning. But it's going to be our opinions anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think,
we're not being didactic here.
The player's perspective on what makes a good warning. Because ultimately, if Ghost Ship had a perspective on what's a good warning, but the players always hated that what they thought was a good warning, then it's not a good warning, right? Like, we, as players, can say what is and isn't a good warning for us at the very least.
Well, if I want to jump in and give a basic definition of what I think a good warning is, I would say something that adds a additional, almost constantly felt threat, but that it's not destructive to the core gameplay either. it doesn't infringe on it. So that's why Cave Leech Cluster is actually surprisingly an okay one.
Really
actually,
solid,
we can leave
I
it here.
think.
Actually, we don't need to actually move it up if given everything's visible. We don't need to like move it into the holding bay or anything. Yeah, it is genuinely solid. I remember you surprising me with your kind words about Cave Leech Cluster once, but I've come to realise it's fine.
Well, I think it's first of all, it adds more cave leeches. Cave leeches are one of the most fun things in the game, right? Not like technically, but like technically, like they're a really fun addition, essentially. But not inherently fun when you get grabbed by them. But I think Cave Leech Cluster is a weird kind of, I would say, oxymoron, in that Cave Leech Clusters are like cave leeches are more of a threat in Cave Leech Cluster because there's more of them, but also less of a threat because you know they're there.
They're supposed to be, but I still sometimes forget, and I feel like that's almost deliberate anyway. Cave leeches are something that you can't really, they don't stay on your mind unless they're there, you know?
Yeah,
but even
like,
when there's more of them, you're not going to remember. It's very...
No, yeah. But until you get that first one, right? That first grab, and then, well, for us at least, it's like, no one told me this was Cave Leech Cluster, and then we realised it is Cave Leech Cluster. And
it's also
why there's like 10 Cave Leeches.
It's a good example of something that I think warnings not necessarily have to do, but sort of something that they should do to a certain extent is make certain demands, at least of your team. As in, I feel like Cave Leech Cluster is one where it actually means that even if you're in a full team, having someone with heightened senses is actually a good idea. Like genuinely,
because Cave Leech Cluster is capable of wiping your entire team.
Exactly. Whereas, like, you know, usually a Cave Leech is just one. Where there's one, there's a team wipe in this case. Pretty usually. Sometimes it's just 3 though.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like 10. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it's a very good mix of increased hazard difficulty and it like changing the caves enough to like fun.
Well, yes, we should talk about also hazard bonuses. It's the lowest one, or it's the lowest range, which is 15%. It's the lowest amount any of them give.
I'm not surprised. Because I think even they realize it's not actually the most threatening thing in there. Because also, and this is, I think, something we might need to mention. Like, there are 2 types of warnings, kind of. I guess 3 is actually probably more fair. There are the ones that just spawn waves or ambushes of that certain enemy. There are ones that, like this one, spawn enemies in the cave waiting for you, or like things in the cave waiting for you, like a bunch of cave leeches, for example, here. And then there are like other ones that just.
Well, it's sort of like I think multiple do actually cross multiple categories. Okay?
Maybe
both Lithophage Outbreak and Lethal Presence both have ambushes and also things that are added to the cave,
which I think is relevant to what we will talk about with
that Cave Leech Cluster. So, well, first of all, it probably isn't actually higher than a B. Also, did you ever notice this? I don't know about you, but for some reason I always saw this as a face because of the way it's constructed. Like the little indents here always look like eyes to me.
Right,
I blow it up. It's just a cave leech, and these are some of its little weird dangly bits, and this is the main grabber part. And it's like, yeah, but it never actually.
The grabber part normally has like 3 prongs, so I would have thought they would have added like the middle bit.
One of them's hit. No, it wouldn't be hidden. It would have to be coming down and whatever. Think it back down. I do think B is the perfect place for it, though. It's not going above and beyond in any capacity, really. It's not the most unique thing in the world. I don't know. B feels pretty correct, though, right? Like,
I don't know. I
think you need to, I feel like you need to be doing a little bit more, but is that inherently a good thing? Just because you're doing more?
I think you are looking at it as the amount it does makes it better.
I'm trying not to. I'm wondering if that's the case.
Especially for them being like the lowest reward, they add a very reasonably good amount of spice to a cave, right? Like it's just more cave leeches, and more cave leeches is I think more preferable than some of the other things where they just summon more.
I bet those high value target guys who focus on that like it a lot as well, because cave leeches are one of those, you know, the kind of thing that can go down in one shot for certain things. And it's like a very high value target.
Can take you down in one shot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the definition of that, aren't they? You know, like
I think because cave leeches are a better thing to have a lot of in a cave. I think it's more interesting, and because of knowing about them makes them slightly easier to deal with, so it's not a broken OP. I think it's pretty good.
I think it makes. I think when it's active, it makes cave leeches like almost a better feature as well, which is interesting.
It makes you think about them at the very least, right? Like you could go 10, 20 games without really getting a cave leech, and then all of a sudden there's like 17 of them, and you're like, whoa, that's like serious whiplash.
Yeah, so it's not wasted potential, and I use those words because what's next on the menu could be considered wasted potential. I would say more so the concept of elite enemies, definitely. Which honestly I think we should talk about at some point. But this is obviously elite threat, which is a 30% hazard bonus, so it's actually the highest aside from the exception. And basically it just means you can encounter elite enemies pretty often. And I genuinely don't know what to make of it anymore. I get it really confuses me because it's like elite enemies. First of all, I think it's becoming pretty fairly understood that they are weirdly frail. I think people understand this now. I don't know if anyone really notices, but like an elite Praetorian is easier to kill than a normal one. And like a menace, you notice it with these things, but it increases lethality and the speed. Well, it's kind of, both of those are the same thing really, and you do definitely notice it. It's kind of just introducing a separate variety of enemies that can basically occur, and for a means that it's very low effort. It's literally just like they're not changing the model in any way.
I don't know. I
something we've always looked at as a good thing. I think variety, low effort variety.
Should we kind of mention the fact that as a like a modifier, it was going to there was going to be elites in the game normally. And there was going to be the warning, but in the end they decided that they'll just leave it as the warning. And I'm not sure if that kind of does imply that I don't know if it implies anything. Like, should we take into account what it would have been or what it is?
Well, what it is mainly.
Yeah. And so I think what it is pretty mediocre at best, right? Like, it can have some fun things, some very fun things. Elite detonators are fun. Elite grabbers are fun. Elite tri-jaws are not fun.
Elite Materia in general, because there's no way to stop them from shooting really before they attack you. It also really fucks with temperature weapons. I should say the temperature weapons. They're just a lot harder to kill with a lot harder to set on fire and freeze than even their normal counterparts. And it's there was some changes made to elite enemies as well that I don't think were correct. Like I do believe the elite oppressor was removed during experimental when it was still a part of normal missions. Elite threat itself as a warning, I think, deserves to have elite oppressors. I think those should be brought back. Why did I have a dream about there being elite stingtails? That's so annoying. I mean, I said it at the time. That's like this is one of the examples actually. I just realised of not this where it's like individual things warnings need to be looked at because there's a couple examples of them that need some attention. Like you look at it makes sense in like if you look back to all the updates since it was added. But if you look at the most recent update being Season 4 and actually getting normal enemies in the pool and then really feeling like the exact kind that would get elite variants, and the fact that they didn't speaks to sort of the oversights that they have that will make warnings sort of, I guess, maybe get worse over time, or at least...
No, already are, I would say. And I think we have a very firm example of that. But yeah, I think this is something where it's a very clear thing that they intended to come back to elites as a feature, as a content. But
yeah, and it sort of got ground to a halt because of the response to elite enemies, though. That's the thing. Yeah. So I feel like it's almost stuck as a warning.
And it's basically it's something that they wanted to elaborate, and I think maybe it deserves elaboration to really warrant being in the game. Yet nobody cares enough about it, so why would they do that?
Yeah, they don't.
So it's basically kind of not half-assed, but half-baked content in the game. So it's not going any higher than B.
Well, that's actually what I'm feeling, because I do genuinely find elite enemies cool, and this might be a weird thing to factor in, and I don't think I'm actually factoring it into the rating. But I found that I really like elite enemies as part of double warnings for some reason. I don't know why, but it feels to me like the best other half. Any given
I think what you're basically
warning.
saying is you would have liked elite enemies to be part of the game normally.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. I think they're just different. They're just variety. It's just variety of enemies. And I guess the problem was it was introducing a lot at once, though. I guess, right?
I think they intended like it wouldn't be anywhere. It like has 1 or 2, I think, and then it started getting more and more common from 3 to 5. And I would genuinely just say they become a possibility, a small possibility in Has 5, and that would be a reasonable addition for them to be in the game from now on.
I mean, I do agree with that. I mean, personally a bigger fan of elite swarms. I mean, obviously that would be a very minimal presence in that they wouldn't be every enemy in the swarm even then. But that's where
Plus,
I'm at
it
on
would
them.
only be on some game modes.
That's true. That's true. Actually, that is true.
But yeah, I don't know. Elites as a concept is a bit half baked, and so this warning kind of gets a bit. I don't know. Some of it's fine. Some of it's a bit much.
I think some of them
Elite
are.
Grabber is always fun.
Yeah, they're not all the most well done. Like, I think Mactera is actually fairly frustrating. But for example, I love elite guards. For example, that might be my favorite actually. They just they are literally mini oppressors. Obviously, they kind of already are, but it's much more so in this case. Yeah, I kind of don't feel comfortable not being mean to it. I don't know. I think middle is really appropriate though, actually. So maybe B is the exact right place for it. Unlike also, I don't know why I used to think Exploding Infestation was a plus 30% bonus, but it's not. It's plus 20%. Which is more appropriate because it's weird, right? It's like it is very dangerous, but also sometimes ignorable, but also not. It constantly
Depends
fluctuates.
who you are, really.
Who you are.
Yeah, like if you're an engineer, you could have a pretty bad time, or like I don't know. I'm trying. Yeah, some characters are a lot better. Like if you have the cryo cannon, it's literally nothing. It's a genuinely zero thing. But I'm trying to work out what's the opposite of that. Like if you're some poor sod, like I don't know. I can't think of what it would be, but I don't know.
Gunner, I guess, but then again, he's got explosive resistance. But
exactly. So I guess it's not that bad for anyone, really.
Not in particular. No. Jesus Christ.
And plus, they often kind of deal with themselves. Like they spawn in pretty high numbers, but that doesn't actually mean much.
Exactly. This is the problem.
They would only ever need to spawn like 2.
They're not actually that threatening because of their numbers. In fact, that's actually their downfall. Really.
No, but they do something else that makes them more threatening, though, don't they? Like, it makes them quicker and quieter.
Yeah, they are quicker and quieter.
Yeah,
loaders.
And that is pretty bad. That's when it gets you.
Yeah, it works pretty well to fuck you up in a lot of different situations, I think. But they're also not like you can always deal with them if you're on it as well, though. Like there really isn't any particular loadout that stops you from being able to take on exploders, especially when they're grouped together like this, where they basically handle themselves. So honestly, it feels to me a fairly well-rounded warning in a lot of ways. I don't think it has any major pitfalls in terms of design. Because you definitely don't forget about them, but they're also sometimes pretty hilariously easy to deal with as well. So they're either a pest or they are actually a problem. So I guess that doesn't sound great, but it's probably the intention. I mean, I guess from what we're saying, I think B is at least a B, but I don't know if it goes higher.
I would say just B. I think it's also just so we're clarifying. This is an example of them just spawning a bunch of an enemy type on you, constantly, like ambushing. And with that, it's essentially all 3 of them are here now, essentially, because Elite Threat is one of the other ones where they add something weirder.
Oh, hold on. There's actually multiple more. Silly goose.
No, I meant it's one of each of those categories I defined is been done.
Oh, you're right. I actually
That's
did. I
kind
had
of
no idea what you were saying. I
clarify
just
then.
completely blanked.
That's fair.
But yeah, exploding infestation. It's also a very weirdly common one. On
It
double
is.
warnings. Double-
I mean, it's just common generally. I like it. I notice that we have it like often. I mean, Life of Age more so now, but like I don't know. I think it might just be more something we're not adverse to doing.
Yeah, I
So
do
we
want to
end up
point
doing it
out.
more often.
I want to point out the very long running sort of myth that is not true. That it increases the chance of bulk detonators spawning, but it's like that is the kind of touch that I think a lot of them could actually do with, personally. Which I guess sort of makes me realize that I think there are actually changes that could be made to most of them. But once again, it's not like it's still not the system's fault. It's still just a case of
Yeah.
almost every individual one having potential that it could reach.
And well, because how things work, right? It wouldn't be increased chance of bulk detonator spawning. It should just be exploder infestation puts bulk detonators, like guarantees them to be in the pool, right?
Silent
Because
ones,
obviously silent ones, yeah,
faster
make them
ones.
quieter too. That would be pretty fun.
Yeah, that'd be
But
horrible.
yeah, no, that would be something that I think if they were to go back and like dedicate a warnings update, I think that would be something they should do. Like for each thing, maybe they could like do something else to like improve it, and I think that would be a step in the right direction for exploder infestation. Because otherwise, it's not that bad. But a little bit more spice.
I'll tell you what is that bad. Is haunted caves, which does give you 30% at least. But still, my god, you do not forget about it. I'll give it that. It's a very constantly felt presence, but I do not enjoy the kind of gameplay that this results in at all. Only because I guess I'm so used to it. There's actually a fair amount of people. I don't think it's a majority though, but there are a fair amount of people who do actually enjoy haunted caves, which I find pretty upsetting, frankly.
I think we have to, because we mentioned it with the elite threat. This is very, very half baked. We're talking like maybe a quarter baked, right? Like they intended to add like at least 3.
Oh,
other
sorry. I
horrors.
was literally. I don't know why I was about to call you out there because I do feel like the unknown horror is what it's supposed to be. But then you're right. There were supposed to be multiple other ghost enemies, or at least it seems that way. I don't think that there's no like data mining that's shown them like ever being at any point. Like it could have been very early. It could have been even been accidental art. Like some guy who just made that based on the haunted caves idea. I don't know,
Yeah, but they've still left the art in the
yeah,
game.
exactly, and it implies something. It doesn't imply anything for their future. We know that because that's kind of like not the right way to look at things. But it implies that there was probably an idea at some point of a bunch of these, like Shellback, which would have been awful, but
or not that bad because it would probably end up getting stuck in a hole somewhere.
and the grabber was pretty scary. I mean, I don't know how you would. I guess it would if it works like a normal grabber though. It'd probably be the easiest one to deal with. Like even if it doesn't take damage, if you still shoot it and it flies away, that's really nothing.
I mean, it'd be a bit of a pest, but otherwise not that bad. Not that lethal, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, there was supposed to be other enemy types, but that didn't happen. So we're left with bulk, which I guess of everything, it wasn't the worst thing in the world to get left with, right? Like he's slow as hell, but it
does enforce an element of
catch
like
up.
pushing forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, but not really though, because you can't push as quickly as he encourages, right? Like if you if you don't turn around every so often, you will have missed whatever you were supposed to do. Plus, there are a lot of this made sense in Morkite mining, right? Nowhere else really.
Well, I mean, I have a
pushing forward thing.
Well, yes, but that's not the only thing it's for. As in, I feel like a very reasonable change to how the unknown horror works would be that it actually can't. It shouldn't really be able to go for you if it can't fit. If you know what I mean. As in, I feel like it should almost like wait outside tunnels until you're in an open space and then tunnel through to that open space, right? Obviously, it can create spaces that it can fit in by digging, but if it's not like, if it has to dig, then it shouldn't be through like an already thin tunnel to get to you. I don't know. I feel like being ambushed in tunnels is really fucking punishing. But when you're in an open space and you kind of have to dance around it, I feel like that's when it's actually not too bad. That's when it's more engaging, but also fair because you have the room to work with it.
Yeah,
I feel like
but it's so low difficulty then at that point though. It becomes kind of annoying. It's just like he's not gonna kill you. You both know it. You're so easily avoiding him, especially if like you're a scout or something. That it's just kind of a waste of time and energy, really. Like I don't know. I think it's like not even B, right? Like it ain't that.
no.
So I guess it's just a matter of how bad do we actually think it is.
It's the well,
it's one of the worst to play. That much we both agree on, right?
yeah.
Like it's that and another thing.
What am I saying? Okay, so if this was based on my opinion, like really how I feel, it would be in D tier. I really do not like doing these missions at all when there's haunted. Like that is one of the things I do genuinely avoid. I find the gameplay really, really bad. I don't think it's challenging for a good reason, personally. I mean, it's very, very artificial difficulty, which is it's not the only example of that. To be fair.
Yeah.
But
well, there will be another one down there for sure.
It's also Haunted Caves is one that it's not the most desperately in need of this because it's not actually that badly designed. I just don't appreciate what it's going for. But I do still think there's a lot that could be done with it. I think having some way to incapacitate it temporarily is very big, like almost needed. Well,
Ghostbuster equipment needs to be cooled down, and you can like bust that ghost. That needs to be a thing.
Yeah, it's not like it's that weird to cool down equipment for a moving target anyway, given that's one of the most recent additions. Cooling down cleaning equipment for Harold is
that would be really cool though, wouldn't it? Like you can cool down like a ghost vac, right? And then you suck it up, put it in like a box, and it gives you like a minute where it's not anything, and then it like bursts out of it, or some shit.
Yeah,
that could be pretty fun.
Yeah,
they lean into the ghost.
Well, I like the idea that it stays inside the vacuum, the litho vac, because you would have to like It's like oh shit, because you can only call in one. So it's like, do I bring it with me or do I leave it behind? So if I leave it behind, then it escapes after a minute, and then when it gets to me, I'm not going to have my litho vac. But if I bring it with me, then when it comes out, it's going to be right on top of me, and it's going to like have a chance of killing you. Yeah. Even though they actually joked about this at one point, they joked about it. It's like, oh, right, okay, great. But I genuinely like that idea. That's the thing. Anyway, we need to speed up. Lethal enemies is interesting because it's not really interesting, but people don't realize how it works. Probably plus 25. First of all, I believe it's the only one that's plus 25%. It actually is. That's gay. And it also doubles all melee damage done to you. Right? That's what it does. Nothing else. A lot of people think, oh, Axis Splitters are so much worse. All. But either way,
Splitters are always horrible.
Exactly. But it is kind of cheap. That's sort of how I really feel about it. It ups the danger level of those kind of enemies, which really enforces like taking slowdown and crowd control and stuff like that, which is not a bad thing for Warning to do. I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world either. I guess in a lot of ways you are inherently weaker, but not actually to everything either. You are not debuffed at least.
No. Your experience is no worse. It's just that I don't know. Certain enemies become a lot more dangerous. Like slashes are essentially game over.
Oh yeah.
Everyone gets you. I mean, they're already close to that, but they really are that.
I mean, it's probably the worst thing. I mean, I can imagine Stingtails being fucking awful now. I haven't really experienced that, to be honest. God. Yeah. That can't be good.
I think it's one of the worst pairing for like double warnings as well. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but like you get lethal enemies with like anything else, and you're really kind of fucked.
Lethal enemies with I guess they're all pretty bad, but I would actually say, oh god, I mean, I was going to actually say because I was thinking about enemies themselves, like Armageddon, pretty fucking awful.
I think it. I don't think it should be rated highly because they didn't put it doesn't feel like it earns much with what it does, right? Like it's not an impressive, interesting, innovative idea which pays off in a good way. It's a pretty simple, flat, double enemy melee damage.
It's just a difficulty up, really. It's very, very simple.
Which I think it's weird that this is like probably one of the only examples of that. They never just did like speed up or defense up or some shit like that.
No, but does it sort of does that speak to it being either that stuff should be there or it shouldn't?
I think it probably shouldn't.
Probably shouldn't.
I would say I'm not sure if it's just because it's empty, but I'm kind of down for a C. Like it's not bad, but it's not, and it's not trying to be better than that either, though. That's the thing.
Anyway, we got we got to move on. We got a fucking whopper. Probably the whopper. That is Lithophage Outbreak, aka the one that adds primary objectives plus 50% hazard bonus. The thing that really did confirm to us that there needs to be some kind of expansion of the modifier system. We thought this is just a completely different thing altogether, and it obviously is. There's no like lack of acknowledgement of that. It's still just forced into being a warning though. Like it's in the missions page as well. Like good God.
Which is it's basically like now obviously we're not doing this on tier list maker. I actually couldn't actually tell. I mean, yeah, you probably can with the way you move it around, but
yeah. Look,
I wish we kind of were, because S tier is too low for it. Like it is above warnings. Like everything these warnings do, this does again and again more. Bigger and better. Like you mentioned that, like there are those 3 different things I described, and it does do like 2 of them. It has things already in the cave, and it spawns things in like ambushes. And I would say it still does more than that, and those things more than the other things like combined. Like it is like 3 times a warning. Plus it's actually on your like objectives thing, and it's just mean to all these other warnings.
But it doesn't inherently make it great. Remember, a lot of people find it to be a pretty like laborious task, and I think there is actually I wouldn't say a necessarily an imbalance, although definitely a slight one in terms of how sometimes it's too much and sometimes it's fairly ineffectual. And by ineffectual, I don't mean it's always felt, but like if it's like 1 contagion spike in an egg hunt, for example. That's not much to speak of. But when you get like 3 in a point extraction, that's fucking brutal,
Isn't there a time where there was going to be like 5?
I don't know.
There was at least 4. There was definitely going to be 4.
I think that is actually. I think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah, I think I remember something like that.
5, like really early on.
Yeah, and obviously it's almost a different piece of content, really, isn't it? I don't know how I would rate it as a warning though. It's not. Honestly. The only thing I think is actually wrong with it on that level is the fact that it has a bit of an imbalance when it comes to certain mission types. Like, honestly, getting more than 1 on a point extraction means you're in for a bad time, pretty much. But it's like, Harry, it's really skewed against point extraction as well. That's
as a warning, it adds now, like, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 enemies to the pool of that mission. Right? Probably only 6, because God knows you're not going to get a Rockbox breeder. But, like, what other warning does anything close to that? None.
No. Rival Presence is not far. It's not far off. It's not. It's not at all.
Rival Presence, actually, yeah, fair enough.
When you actually think about it, it's really not far off at all.
Yeah, I would say, because Rival Presence really was a step towards it. But I would say Rival Presence. I mean, this is obviously getting ahead of ourselves, but Rival Presence is an S. I think that was going to.
Hold on. Well, don't jump ahead like that. First of all,
it's just my point that I think this is above that.
Yes. So it's sort of almost unrankable then, isn't it? But
yeah.
I guess purely as a warning, like, but you can't divorce the fact that it adds an objective from it, because otherwise it would be completely different if you didn't actually have to deal with the contagion spikes. It's an entire ecosystem of like 2 seasons basically. That's pretty surfing.
Yeah, and like Bro, that we'll use that as an example. That is not like the rival thing is just the storage of those seasons. Like it's just one of the places where you could encounter them. But this is these last two seasons. These last two seasons have been built for this single warning. Like, bear that in mind. Like, fucking all the warnings we've ranked so far: spawns cave leeches, spawns exploders, adds 200% melee damage from it to enemies or whatever, right? And now you have 2 seasons, a year's worth of development time on a single fucking warning. It's just absurd.
I want to mention what I did. I do want to mention what I said earlier, that it's one of the only ones though, by adding primary objectives, it's one of the only ones that could actually be considered somewhat destructive to the core gameplay, but that's only because it is also a mission type. So it's like, in my opinion, it's going beyond in a lot of ways that is separate from how you would rate a warning, though.
Yeah, it has. I guess that is actually fair. It has so many pluses, which ultimately mean nothing in this ranking, right? Like, it adds so many new enemy types. Like, it gives you a new objective, new equipment to use, like a new status effect. All these things, but ultimately, all a warning ever really had to do was change how you played the game, and the way that it does that isn't arguably a great thing. So. Yeah, I think I agree with it. It goes above and beyond in areas that don't really matter for this tier list, for warnings. And so I think it's probably still an A.
Yeah, exactly. A is what I was thinking, in that it's a very different piece of content, as we discussed, but so you have to like factor in, does all the things that make it different from a warning take away from it being ranked as a warning? And I would say in some ways, definitely, actually. Definitely. It's different from a warning, and obviously warnings are all different in their own ways, but it's like it breaks one of the only trends really, which is being forced to do a task to complete the mission is not something that warnings normally do.
These warnings just change the difficulty of completing the mission.
Yeah, in terms of the warning elements though, in terms of adding things to the caves that make it more interesting, in terms of adding enemies to deal with as well, completely different types of enemies. It's a really fantastic example of, like, if it was just a warning, if there was nothing mandatory about it, it would still be a fantastic alteration to missions, basically. So I actually think A tier is the only place you can put it. It's obviously, it's a bit of a caveat. I don't know if I can make it glow. No, but we'll leave it as it is. But yeah, I mean, God damn it, if phage outbreak.
Yeah,
it's different. It's different. But for the best we can do is put it in A tier for this.
Yeah, and I think generally enjoy it. I think if we actually didn't like it, it would probably be lower down, despite all the stuff it does.
Yeah, I'm very glad that we like it as well.
It's just, I don't know. It's just, that's the thing. They did so much in it, yet it's competing against all these other things that generally some of them are pretty harmless, and like people will like yeah, I don't know. It's just a bit silly, goofy. But moving on. This is the silliest and goofiest, and getting that motherfucker in D right now.
Low oxygen. Low oxygen is actually a really good example of them like paying attention to something low. Like, low oxygen actually has a weird amount of nuance. It's really, which is upsetting because I hate it. Like, and by that I mean, I actually think the mule aspect is somewhat interesting, of having to stay near the mule, kind of. And also, obviously, they added it to resupplies. That's always been the case. But then, point extraction, it's adjusted, so it's on the mine head, which creates a lot of intensity in that mission. And then, later on, low oxygen already exists, but then suddenly on-site refining and escort duty get added, both with their own ways. I mean, on-site refining less so. That's basically the same as point extraction. But then escort duty, it actually complements escort duty. Like, I don't like escort duty, but I don't have a problem when there's a lot of oxygen on it. It's just really weird. I don't know. I just find those aspects of it very interesting, that they've managed to. There's been a bit of upkeep on it, basically.
It's because escort duty, right? the reason why people hate escort duty is the same reason why people hate low oxygen, because they're doing the same thing. They are tethering you, tying you into this single place. You have to be here, right? Like obviously low oxygen a little less so, but you still have to be near Molly. It's just Molly moves where you want her to, so it's a slightly bit more reasonable. But yeah, it's just like, yeah, I think it's just unfun, inherently unfun. Like anti-exploration. I mean, it's supposed to, I think, probably reinforce sticking together, right? I think it's supposed to. You could claim that it does that. Like everyone has to stick around the mule and work together in that. But
or the scout is never allowed to call it.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, if you're trying to actually scout like that, it's just, I don't know. It just wastes everyone's time, because it just means that like that's just not how it works. It's not how the game works. Players, even when they're together, they're more spread out than that allows, right? The caves are bigger than low oxygen can really do reasonably. Like, you can all be in the same cave and you'll have someone suffocating somewhere.
Okay, I want to actually bring it back. I think my philosophy is becoming actually sort of reinforced in that it's showing up. Like, low oxygen is... Like, they actually paid a lot of attention to it, like I said. Like, I even forgot about salvage drop, and also just the fact that the drop pods themselves have, like, the widest oxygen range. And then salvage drop has oxygen on, like, the uplink module and fuel cells and all these kind of different things. Like, even, like, if you get it on a deep dive with a black box objective, the black box will have oxygen tanks on it. All of these little things that they paid attention to, and yet it is probably the most... It's just extremely destructive to the core gameplay, which when we look at all the other warnings, I don't think the other warnings are really that. I don't think they really take away from the core gameplay. They just add things that can make it more difficult, but they don't inherently alter the way the game is played. And even if they do, this is a bad example of it.
Yeah, well, because literally, if they didn't add those things, then it would actually like end up basically soft locking you out of winning the mission, right? If there wasn't the places where you were supposed to be, if they didn't have oxygen, you would actually be unable to complete the mission. Like, and that they knew that. That's why they still, other warnings they can probably easily completely forget about. Like, I doubt they have thought about like, I don't know, cave leech cluster in years. Like, they've probably not had to worry about that at all while making a game mode. But low oxygen, and I would argue haunted caves as well, because
given that haunted caves is blacklisted from both salvage operation and escort duty, so is this almost there is actually almost like something there, isn't there? In that you would think that these ones having been paid attention to is actually a good thing. Like, it means they're not. It means there's no oversight going on, but it's almost a It's almost clearly a problem, given that they are at the bottom. Does that say something about the fact that they are forcing them to work around these warnings or change things because of them? Meaning that they're not actually seamless, They're not seamless. Not that Live Phage Outbreak is.
No, but can you blame it compared to those two? Like, those two do, like, spawn a single entity and add, like, a timer, and yet they manage to be as big as an issue as things that do that, add 7 new enemies, add a new objective, new equipment.
Like, even the difference between like the ones in D tier and lethal enemies is it's like lethal enemies still adds like a lot of challenge and arguably sort of artificial as well. It's like it's arguably not great, but it's still seamless with the game itself. It doesn't require any kind of workaround, anything like that. I mean, that's really annoying actually. I mean, that's something that I think they clearly paid a lot of attention to, is sort of like that. And even I do think though, something for low oxygen, aside from maybe just needing like a big rework anyway, I don't know, would be on like refinery, like the pump jacks need oxygen tanks, frankly. Otherwise you're just completely limited to the refinery, and it's pretty punishing. So at least do that. But then again, that's almost part of the problem. Yeah. Shame. What a shame. Shame. Mactera Plague.
Yeah, what is that actually depicting?
I don't know. It's just a grabber arm, maybe?
Yeah, it seems
Must be. Why though? Why that?
I think that this sucks. I hate it, but it's fine, right? It's another one of the examples of they just spawn an enemy type, but the better one, I would say, because the exploders is just exploders. Swarmageddon, it's just swarmers. But this one, at least, it's Mactera as a species, which I think is a lot fairer.
Yeah,
right?
I actually think Mactera Plague is I like Mactera Plague actually quite a lot. I think it's really good at not enforcing, but actually making certain builds very rewarding. Like it's not.
You get like 5 try jaws.
Well, it's a pretty good build check. It's a good build check because it's not actually that limiting. It just makes other certain builds really excel. Like it's actually amazing for the grenade launcher. Like genuinely, any incendiary grenade launcher. Probably also the hurricane as well. Sort of things that are explosive, and also high precision as well.
Yeah, anything that uses fear that pays off quite well.
And all these kind of things. It's not that limiting. Although if you have nothing that is really like sort of at least tilting a bit towards Mactera, you are going to be at a significant disadvantage. It's also on top of everything. They're not really spawning in place of anything else either.
Which I think isn't anti-game as a whole. It's just not often warnings do it, right? Like if you're walking into a elimination with like an AOE build, you're gonna get screwed over. That's something the game always does. But with warnings, they're not often as build like centric in how difficult they are.
And I guess that could be considered somewhat destructive, but I don't think this is a bad example of it. I think there is a bad example of it though, and I don't think it's this.
I think it's A. I just so we're clear on this.
Really? I like it a lot, like I said.
It's difficult. It's difficult, but it adds you were on a Mactera Plague mission and you regret it, but it ain't not fun, right?
Yeah, like honestly, it's fun if you're it's definitely, especially if you specialize for it, I guess as well. Yeah. It's I guess Mactera are somewhat like infamous on average. They could be considered the most infamous like species.
I would say because of Mactera Plague. Yeah, I would say that is the main culprit.
I would say because
people
of Trijaws.
Yeah, but Trijaws that occur a lot more often during Mactera Plague. Like it is. I don't know. I think it's Mactera are the flying glyphids because of Mactera Plague. I think if we didn't have Mactera Plague, they would be so much less.
Their presence wouldn't be felt enough. Not that, obviously, there's no like glyphid plague. That's what I want. I want grunt apocalypse. By the way, that's what I want.
Always.
Just constant grunt swarms, not swarmers. Swarmers. We'll get to it. Not. Yeah. Speaking of ass.
Yeah.
Speaking.
No one's met parasites in years, and we don't blame them. Either get rid of it or rework it. The only options.
Rework it into like a Rockpox thing, right? Basically, that's how I see it.
Mactera Plague. That's how I did it. Or they're larvae, right? They're not like.
Well, they're supposed to be parasites, but they're also called carnivorous larvae. Yeah, but
yeah.
Oh.
So I always saw it as, give them a little bit of time. Like if an enemy doesn't die quick enough, after maybe you damaging it, it will explode into a Mactera. That's the way I would spin it. Parasites
is actually not like it's not actually that bad in any particular way. It's just kind of whack. It's just kind of, and it's a real sore spot that you never see it because I'm pretty sure it's just like completely been pushed out of the game. I think you can only really see it on double warnings anyway.
I don't know why it's in D tier, because they added parasites to a dwarf game. And they didn't add a voice line saying, the parasite's as big as my arm.
Yeah, great voice acting there.
Thank you. I don't do dwarf.
I've got parasites as big as my arm.
Sure.
A bit more like that.
You get the point, though.
No.
That, there's no voice line like that. Therefore, it sucks.
Yeah, I think that's probably you being a bit silly, Tyler. I think
everyone knows that parasites, it was nothing when you could do it, and now you can't even do it.
Yeah, so it revolves around it being nothing. I could honestly put it in C tier and not be too upset, but I kind of just want to make a point here. It's like it's a nothing burger, I guess. And it's also, it could be reworked into something better. It would have sucked to have like 3 warnings in a row, but personally I would not have had a big problem if season 4 reworked parasites into something like that, for Rockbox, I would not have any problem. Although I guess maybe doubling up on warnings for different factions though could be might not be a great idea either. That might be a bit iffy.
Because
yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it being removed at all, not even slightly. It's gay and small and bad.
Yeah,
kind of whack. Because they're so ineffectual as well. They're nothing. It's nothing. Regenerative bugs.
It's a bit odd, isn't it?
I like this one. It's cool. It's like a small one. It's like meant to be a small bonus. It's only plus 15%.
It's like the lethal enemies one, really.
Yeah, it's a bit more similar to that, I guess. But I actually think it's fairly interesting, to be honest. I think in a lot of cases you don't experience it, but at the same time it still encourages certain things. Like, if for some reason you don't finish things off, you are reminded of that. You need to finish things off. That's really what it enforces. And then things like menaces are suddenly arseholes.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's a fairly neat effect. It's pretty basic, though. It's pretty basic. It's not doing a whole lot. It's not uber interesting. But I think it's adding value and a little bit of spice in some specific areas. And also, it's sort of like it can punish you if you don't play through it as well. A little bit. I think it's okay. Basically.
Yeah, I have no strong opinions on regenerative bugs.
I don't have strong opinions either. I just think it's I think it's just in an okay, decent place, and it does enough, maybe.
Yeah. No, yeah. So I think it's fine in B. Moving on.
Beep bop, beep bobbly beep blub.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh?
Moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Survival presence. Yeah. Well, yes, probably, almost definitely. But why isn't it? Why shouldn't it be an S? Maybe that's
if you don't like
more
rivals,
important.
Then it wouldn't be an S.
Yeah, right. Them being the enemies that they are is the biggest argument for it not being an S, basically. But aside from that, which is obviously an extremely important part of it, it's doing a lot of things, and it's doing them all very well, I think, as well. It's adding a relatively constant presence that sort of is a bit of a build. The thing is, it's a build check. This is the problem I'm sort of running into in putting an S tier. It's a fairly significant build check. There's a lot of builds that don't work too well against rivals. Although I don't think it's actually that bad. Like, I don't think it's as bad as people think. Like, even in Hazard 5, you're not a huge disadvantage if you're not specialised. Obviously, some things don't work against them, mainly the cryo cannon. But aside from that, I don't think that part of it is that bad. And obviously, we have sort of these ambushes, and we have... Well, it's not adding a huge amount of elements when you really think about it. It's only adding 2 main elements, but there's actually a lot going on inside them. You have the ambushes are just patrol bots and shredders, yes, but those are they actually surprisingly work on a lot of levels, covering a lot of ground for enemy types.
They don't spawn as many as the other ones, really, do they? Like,
no,
they throw a lot less like rival ambushes at you than Mactera or Exploders, which is probably for the best.
Yeah.
But I just want to quickly admit, I've not played one of these in ages. Like, genuinely, I don't think I played them in like season 3 or 4 now. I don't think I've seen them or played them.
They're around. They're not uncommon at all. Yeah, they're not uncommon at all.
You could remember the last time you hacked a thingy.
Yeah.
A turret controller.
Yeah, it's like the other day.
Yeah. I guess it's just something we just miss each other a lot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so the turret controller is probably the it's like the cake and the cherry, yes, and
it
then
wouldn't be an S if there wasn't the turret controller.
Turret controller is awesome, man. I mean, I think I remember when season 2 came out. I do sort of remember it wasn't really pronounced. If you looked at like the preview or the patch notes, either of those things, the turret controller was not a thing, really. All the footage really showed was just pretty much just swarms of robots and shredders, and it looked really awful. So like, you realize the numbers of those are nowhere near what they are, but which was like, oh, so it's just like occasional patrol bots and shredders. And then you find a turret controller, and you realize it's almost completely different. There's this thing.
Yeah.
It's not too dissimilar from a contagion spike. That's the thing. I do genuinely think that the contagion spikes were an evolution of it.
Yeah.
In terms of
They were
adding
like,
the potential for multiple of them, making it an objective. But the turret controller still is something that really, in my opinion, plays a lot more into the sort of the terrain that you can experience, and also when you find it in a mission. Sometimes it's ignorable, sometimes it's not at all. But I never don't want to do it. I always want to do it as well. I actually find them to be really interesting, cool encounters. It seems like a lot of turrets, but it I don't know. It just it rewards strategic play, or it rewards having a really good build for it. It can also be cheesed in a way that I don't think is actually that bad, but it's also not too difficult anyway. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, Tyler. Though I don't know why I'm not feeling S. I'm actually not.
Kind of the same, but like, it's just enjoyment value. To be honest with you, like, rivals aren't that fun to do, so getting more of them isn't exactly amazing. But I think and this is the difficult thing again, is that I think we both agree that this is essentially the pinnacle of what you could call a warning.
Yeah, it's also got nemesises, as they can spawn them. Like, you can spawn multiple of them over the course of the mission potentially. Right?
A good or normally bad thing,
good. It's a good thing, definitively. Yeah. It's just the best example of rivals, really, isn't it? I think season 2 was the superior one in terms of the implementation of those enemies. Frankly, so damn.
Yeah, damn. I think. Well, because let's be honest, if anything would be an
S, hold on.
Probably only going to be that now.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess maybe a better question to ask is if we think it's the best warning. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think every warning should aspire to be, or every warning from now on should aspire to be more like this. They saw this and they were like, we like this, let's push it further. Then they ended up with the Liquophage infestation, right? But I would say tone it back down to rival presence level.
Yeah, I personally feel like
something to the cave and adds whatever presence you want there, being a more permanent thing as well.
Yeah, so I'm sort of the opinion that Liquophage outbreak could be dialed back to the same as rival presence basically after season 4. I can see that happening, kind of.
I think we could have. You could easily have looked at a point in time where it wasn't an actually objective. Like, there could have easily been a point in time where Liquophage spikes would have just been something that was there that you had to move on from, right? That like the Liquophage enemies are there.
They could have even been just things that you just kill if you need to. It might not have even been like that. Might have been before that even like Litho tools were thought of. You just kill all the stuff around it. You just destroy all the pods, kill all the enemies, and it dies or something.
Yeah. And even then, you didn't have to do it. Like, there may have been a point in time where they conceived that, or maybe they knew from the get-go that they wanted to do the second primary objective type thing.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, like the turret controller is actually, I think, is a better encounter because obviously the contagion spikes are meant to be sort of objectives, which is why it makes sense that they're a little bit more defined in how you're meant to go about it. But I think the turret controller, like, you can either hack it or you can destroy the turrets is really the two ways. Or you just destroy enough turrets so that you can hack it even if you're not cheesing it.
I still don't think they nailed that. I remember fighting pretty adamantly that it's kind of ass, and I think I still agree with that.
What's kind of ass?
The turret controller. Like, it, yeah, you have to basically destroy most of what you need to then hack it. Either that or you get Driller and you cheese it. But I don't know. I don't think the implementation was amazing, but I think the idea is. Like, and I think that's probably why we don't think it's an S, because I don't think it technically is. Like, I think we both think they can do better than this, but not Liquophage Outbreak, but Rival Presence are done with better things, and those things are better, not more.
I suppose the unfortunate thing about that is it is still a relatively high effort warning, and I'd rather see. I think most people would rather see, at least for a little bit, high effort content that isn't
elsewhere.
warnings.
Yeah,
That
we've
isn't
had too
warnings.
many warnings. That much everyone agrees on. Like nobody wants a warning.
It's beyond that. Everyone agrees that we want a bio, pretty much. It's pretty unanimous. Yeah. It's pretty unanimous at this point. But the point is, not the point is, a separate point is, though, that warnings, you also want to see more basic ones, I think. Right? Because I know I do.
I wouldn't want to see, if we're getting basic ones, I wouldn't just want to see a basic one. I would want to see a couple basic ones, because if they're really as simple as like, you know, the I've forgotten it, lethal enemies or regenerative bugs or anything like that, just adding like 2 or 3 of those a season will be pretty nice, right? Just 2 or 3 simple ones, or maybe just more ambushes.
It's honestly why it's why I hold update whatever it was in such high regard. The update that preceded season 1. That is the update that added Elite Threat and Swarmageddon, which is not a good one, by the way.
Expectations.
It's called Modest Expectations, even though the modding part's delayed. But it also added those 2 warnings, and also added double warnings, which is one of the best additions ever. Which is I didn't know if we wanted to factor that in any way. Not to the ratings. I don't even know if I have an opinion on what the best double warning is. Like combination. I don't really. I probably like the Elite Threat and like Rival Presence or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, that was just incredible. Sorry, I just smacked my earphones off my head. Which is dumb as hell. Okay, we do need to move on from my presence, so we need to make sure we're actually satisfied. I don't know if I can be satisfied with it, but like this is, I'm just realizing this is a weird tier list. That's the thing.
Yeah, I genuinely think, and this is something, if you're listening to and didn't just skip to the end, you wouldn't know this. But I think this tier list, without that being there, could easily not have an S. I think we genuinely could talk ourselves down from having any of them in S.
Yeah.
I do not think they have added the perfect warning yet. Not that any of them are inherently bad, like some of them are, but like some of them really aren't. But I think what I think is the ideal warning has yet to be done. Maybe it means it's not really the ideal, considering it's not been done.
I mean,
yet,
I do think that. I mean, obviously we put it in B tier, but I do think Elite Threat is close to being pretty much almost completely devoid of issues. Personally,
yeah, but it could be better.
Anyway, we got 2 more. Shield Disruption.
I'm thinking C.
Damn. Yeah, so am I. I think actually it and Lethal Enemies belong together.
A very flat difficulty increase.
Very, very fucking harsh one too. Like, good God, Jesus Christ! It is painful. You will experience a lot of pain with Shield Disruption.
But it's like with like this and Lethal Enemies, and what isn't like in D is that and ignoring the Parasites one, D it's harder, but you need to like play differently. Like you have to play with how the game wants you to. With these 2, it's harder, but you just need to play better. Like you just need to kill the enemies before they hit you, essentially, to not really suffer the consequences. But with the 2 in D, it's like you have to avoid the thing constantly. You're always being near Molly.
I do also think Shield Disruption is one of the ones that is not quite. It actually has some potential to be a bit more engaging rather than just a really frustrating sort of debuff, basically. If it actually played into having random areas of Shield Disruption dead or something like that, or ways to replenish them even still, actually similar to low oxygen, unfortunately. Not just because Shield Battery Booster exists either, that's one overclock, but it's still kind of weird, that's a thing. But in general, I feel like Shield Disruption could actually be slightly better than it is. As in, it could, well, obviously it could be better, but I think it could be actually something kind of cool. It could literally be like, even like maybe even the areas where you get shields, maybe the enemies do as well. I don't know, some weird shit like that. I just think there's the thing is, it's like a very basic one, but also not a very nice one. You know? Which is why I'd rather see it turned into something cool and interesting. rather than just stay as like a really flat, like frustrating debuff instead.
Maybe, but I don't know. A simple debuff is kind of not that bad. I mean, it's a pretty bad debuff, but I don't think that being in the game is inherently that bad. But obviously, yeah, it's not great. It's insane, but no, it's not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes I don't even notice that we have it.
That's kind of weird.
Well, I mean, if I'm using the cryo cannon, it doesn't change much, right?
No, no, I guess not. I guess not. Oh well. Okay, the last one on the chopping block is, of course, Shawarmageddon.
A lot better in concept than it ended up being.
Much better in concept. Honestly, I might be wrong. I think it's probably unfair because I think they know the kind of enemies that Swarmers actually are. Swarmers are not the kind of enemies that you just cleave through groups of them and it's really satisfying. They are little fucking ticks that you more often than not have to kill one at a time.
Yeah.
Which is why, to me, the concept is actually Gruntpocalypse rather than Swarmageddon. That's sort of, I feel like that's what they actually wanted to do. Maybe because that's so much more inherently satisfying. But maybe it actually is deliberately meant to be really fucking frustrating. Because my god, Swarmageddon is just a fucking thorn in my side. It makes Burning Hell feel fucking incredible. I'll give it that. But aside from that, it's one of the most like intrusive build checks. I think genuinely,
yeah, and
it fucks with you almost 100% of the time.
Yeah, but it's not even like physically. Like Mactera, your build check is like physical. You will die, and it will be a cruel, merciless death. But they probably won't kill you because I don't know if you have like thorns and a pickaxe or just a pickaxe generally, or like using any weapon, you'll probably kill them all. But God knows it will hurt you mentally. You will get mentally build checked.
Scout's fucking nightmare. That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. Obviously, firebolts. Like there are ways to deal with it, but it just borders on being too specific. I think really. Like engineer, you basically like smart rifle's actually fine, but it's actually going to use a lot of ammo. Like engineer's not terrible if you're like very on it with building turrets. So you also have both the smart rifle and the shard diffractor, because God knows that you don't want to use either of your other secondaries on swarmers. Gun is actually okay most of the time, actually. Minigun, but only if you got Burning Hell. But both of the other weapons are fine against swarmers. But it's pretty fucking frustrating, really. When I think about it, there's probably more builds that work against it than not. But it's also just one enemy type, right? It's not like Mactera Plague. It's not Mactera Plague. It's like
it is more Exploding Infestation.
It's the other end of this, but it's the lowest out of them, though. Definitely.
Yeah. Would you say C?
I think so. I mean, I think only because
nice.
It does look nice, doesn't it? It's like a big like walkie-talkie.
Maybe put the rival one on like the middle bit, if you know what I mean. No.
Well, it's nice because it sort of like does like sort of know how to put, it sort of has like these outlines that let you line things up. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Wow. Okay. Yeah, I really don't know how to feel about this, but I just felt like we needed to do a warnings tier list at some point, and I think it was always going to be somewhat dubious how we actually rate them. So this is just like I guess a bit of a shot in the dark, but sort of plays into us trying to figure out some kind of formula, but also just going off of our feelings. And I do think it's fairly comprehensive. I think, it speaks to our own uncertainties. I think Rival Presence is probably going to be the most fought back against pick, right? I feel like, in terms of rating. But that's actually understandable. But I think apart from that...
I think it should be mentioned, I mentioned it before, but yeah, I think Cave Leech Cluster is my favourite warning. And what would you say yours is?
Rival Presence.
Rival Presence, so fair enough.
Yeah.
So, it is... They are up there. If we wanted to do something, I would be down to put Cave Leech in S, but that might be a step. Yeah. But,
Don't you dare.
I don't know. I don't know what this says. I don't know what these means.
The numbers Mason. The warnings Mason.
I think D is going to be universally agreed on. I think
hopefully.
No one really. I don't know. It's
I
weird.
I think they're all going to be universally agreed upon, apart from like literally apart from.
They just
Oh,
don't like
actually, honestly, I think B and C, I think, are actually perfect. Genuinely.
I don't know. I think people like lethal
Shut
warnings more than that. Lethal enemies.
Shut up. Anyway, we need to wrap this up. This was, you know, I did have sort of like a limited amount of time today, and it's not like this is a short video. But at the same time, maybe we were a bit less, how do you say, thoughtful. I think we were just sort of stumbling through it a little bit. I feel like that's also the nature of this kind of thing anyway.
Yeah.
Something where you can't really, it's hard to pin down the real way you're supposed to evaluate these things. Which I actually think is fairly interesting as well. So I don't think this should be taken as being that didactic either. Like this should, obviously I don't think anyone takes what we say as fact, but even also here, I don't think this should be taken as like a particularly objective, unless everyone agrees with it, in which case sure. Also, if you're wondering why this is done in the format that's been done in, it's because Tier Maker is a fucking awful website, and it's almost impossible to make tier lists, at least for me. I just couldn't. It got so fucking frustrating. I just gave up and I went for something that is so much easier. Obviously, you lose the flexibility of being able to create different tiers, but that's all right. Fine, even though it almost did trip us up a little bit. Sorry about that. There'll probably be an anomalies one at some point as well. I mean, there will be. I don't know when. Not like insanely far away, but we got to do that as well. That's another missing one.
Feels like it'll be even more weirder.
It will be. That would be very weird. It would be very bizarre. Thank God we didn't try and do both in one though.
Yeah, that
Jesus
wouldn't
Christ. But yeah, that was the Battle Vision warnings tier list. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a warning and a like down below. And by warning, I mean a comment. And by anomaly, I mean subscribe. Gotta go. Gotta go.
Bye-bye.
I'm just gonna leave the recording. I'm just gonna... Alright. Babushi. Babushi. Babadua. Babadabeo. Goodbye.